Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another Semen Retention Sunday episode on the regalchange YouTube channel here. My name is Thaddeus, and today we're going to have the topic of generational curses and epigenetics on semen retention and what the combination of what epigenetics are and what generational curses are, the link between the two, and how semen retention can affect those going forward. So, for those that are unfamiliar with epigenetics, it's a biological term in science where it's essentially where genes can be passed down or inherited unto children based off of a few different characteristics, including the environment, including food or dietary, smoking, alcohol, addictions, etc., stress, etc., etc. So these are all qualities that can play a factor into how genes code for proteins to create neural pathways in the brain. Now, if you have an inherited epigenetic system in which your nervous system, because there's two parts of the nervous system. There's the parasympathetic nervous system and there's the sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is responsible for your fight or flight response. The parasympathetic nervous system is responsible for digestion, calmness, etc. So most people are operating in their sympathetic nervous system most of the time. They're not even aware of this. And the only time that they're not operating in that is usually when they're asleep. And so that is, of course, when the body can heal the most and can go through different changes the most. But what exactly epigenetics can be is a passing down of trauma. Now, this can be any kind of trauma. Now, that's the scientific side. Now, as far as the biblical side, as far as generational curses are concerned, I'm going to read a passage from Numbers here. It's Numbers 14:18. It says, "The Lord is long-suffering and of great mercy, forgiving iniquity and transgression, and by no means clearing the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the generation and the children unto the third and fourth generation." So, for some reason, our ancestors that did not know about this kind of science that we do today, this epigenetics, they were able to notice that there were certain patterns of behavior that accumulated in generations of families. And those kinds of patterns were also iniquities that were passed down from generation to generation. Well, what exactly does that mean then? Well, obviously, in some way, they understood that God will punish the generations of the children of the people that commit the sins. Well, that doesn't seem fair, doesn't it? Why would God do that? Well, now we understand what that is. We understand that scientifically what epigenetics are. So I have not seen any other content correlating and comparing and contrasting epigenetics and semen retention and generational curses. So I do believe I'm in novel territory here, which means that we need to make sure that we take this with a pound of salt and understand that even though a lot of this is theoretical knowledge and understanding based off of scientific evidence, it's still based off of scientific evidence. And a lot of people can think that semen retention is pseudoscience, but those that have really tried semen retention understand this. For example, in almost every single person that I've talked to that has done semen retention, or a woman that I've talked to that is actually celibate, they've noticed certain kinds of patterns that are either they're being tried for or they are overcoming them as an obstacle. So, for example, wet dreams is going to be a highly discussed obstacle for those that are males practicing semen retention. There are two types of wet dreams. There's the the physiological release, which happens when semen retention is naturally built. Semen is naturally building up and it needs to be released because of all the retention. And then there's the pathological release where you are essentially thinking about sex too much and in a degenerate way. And in the first case, the physiological case, you're going to wake up feeling refreshed, renewed, etc. Whereas the second, the pathological, not the physiological, you're going to wake up feeling as though you are drained of energy and you've lost a certain amount of like spiritual strength to that. And a lot of the times these could also be spiritual attacks. Now, what I believe to be spiritual attacks is basically when you are healing your nervous system, your parasympathetic or your sympathetic nervous system, right? So on semen retention, because you're abstaining from certain kinds of patterns of behavior, you might be changing your diet. You might be having less stress because of you're not participating in the PMO, which is corn, masturbation, orgasm, etc. You're not participating in these things, so there's a natural inclination of change occurring. Now, what happens biologically with epigenetic marks, because epigenetic marks are, there's been scientific studies on this with rats, for example, where the rats neglected the children of those rats. So the babies of the rats were neglected, and the babies of those same rats, when they grew up, they had their own babies, they actually neglected those babies as well. So that is an example of a generational curse, spiritually speaking, where certain patterns of behavior or environments were transferred over into the next generation, unknowingly or knowingly. And so this can happen with us humans as well, especially with like forms of addiction. Because what you're doing when you are inducing in and participating in addictive behavior, especially if you're like a mother with child and you don't really know it until weeks in, and you're drinking or you're smoking or whatever, that is going to play a direct impact on the child's life long term down the line. Because everything that the mother's taking in is going in through her bloodstream into the child. And that's going to affect the process of how the child grows up. This is one of the reasons why I think we need to take life more sincerely. Maybe not seriously, even though that would be helpful as well sometimes for some people, but we need to take life more sincerely. This isn't all just a game to play. Like a lot of people, whenever you're actually embarking on a spiritual journey, you eventually get to a point where you ask yourself, well, what's this all for? Like what is life really about? What really is the meaning of life? And a lot of people don't even really have an answer to that question. If you were to ask most people, they don't want to think about that kind of stuff. Why? Because it forces them to engage with themselves. And this is one of the reasons why you must know who you are in order to be happy. You cannot be happy without knowing who you are. I genuinely believe that. Because gratitude, well, you get joy from gratitude, number one. And so when you're actually grateful for your life, you actually are genuinely appreciative of your life, and you're not just saying that just to manipulate somebody or yourself into getting something that you want. When you're actually behaving in a way that is genuinely grateful, but you're not like too humble around people, right? Like, because sometimes if you're too humble around people, it's like they're just going to try to take advantage of you. So you're humble, but you're also bold and strong, and you have a backbone, right? You don't have a wishbone, you have a backbone. So understanding that, putting yourself in uncertain situations, because uncertainty is, well, it's uncertain. You might encounter trouble, you might encounter something really positive. You don't really know until you go through it. But what's going to happen is you can, biologically speaking, generate new genes that activate and code for new proteins, which create new neural pathways in your mind. Now, this is one of the reasons why I think psychedelics are so powerful, but they're also something you don't necessarily toy with. And I'm not advocating for the use on this channel, but I have talked about psychedelics in the past, and I have talked about how I wouldn't be who I am without psychedelics. But this is something that psychedelics do as well. Psychedelics create new neural pathways for you. And there's been studies that have shown that almost 75 to 90% of the participants that were engaged with studies came out on the other side more open-minded, more compassionate, and more fulfilled and more understanding about life in general. That's incredible. 75 to 90% of all the people and all the studies out there, that's really incredible. Now, with semen retention, because I want to bring this all together with semen retention specifically, now that we've got a lot of backstory here. So semen retention, you're going to be engaging in different behaviors, and you're going to be engaging in different modes of being. And this is one of the reasons why people, I think, can get so much attention on semen retention, or even women that are celibate, they can get a lot of attention. It's because you are legitimately psychophysiologically more pure than most of the people on the planet. How many people do you think are actually participating in celibacy on the earth? I don't, like, voluntarily, let's say, as well, because a lot of people are doing it involuntarily. But how many people are voluntarily doing that? I know I am. I'm doing this voluntarily. I'm an old school person. I'm not old, but I'm old school when it comes to this kind of stuff. And the reason for that is because I've seen what it's like for people that are not old school. I've seen what it's like for people that are participating in vain desires all the time. And, even just within the last few weeks, I've seen people that I used to know in my past. And it turns out that, because I haven't seen them for so long, it's just like, wow, that was a demon that I was talking to. That wasn't even a person. That was a demon. And semen retention is going to give you, because you have celibacy in general, you're going to have such clarity of mind, because you're not actively trying to participate in degeneracy. You're not actively trying to be a depleted coomer. You're actually trying to build your life. You're actually trying to create something that is pure. And this is going to be what happens with spiritual attacks as well. One of the reasons that people get so many spiritual attacks on semen retention is because I think it's because, theoretically speaking here, based off of the evidence that I have biologically and just the experience that I have spiritually, what I think is actually going on is when you have a spiritual attack on celibacy or on semen retention, you're going to be activating these new genes that can code for new proteins, because you're naturally participating in something that most people are not. And so it's almost like life itself is going to naturally weave your way into existence so that you can operate on a totally new level of being. And so you get spiritual attacks because you're operating in this new level and mode of being. You're someone that is just radiating purity. And this is something that, like, I've literally had people tell me my skin is glowing. And there have been times where even me myself, like, if I haven't had like a wet dream for a very long time, which that's happened before, where it's been like 3 or 4 months since I had a wet dream, because I've been on semen retention since May of 2022. It was like 3 or 4 months, and I looked at my hand one day, and I was just like, I don't know. This is strange. This is legitimately strange. I do see like this light emanating from my skin, and people have said that to me, and that's really just your cells. Your cells are operating at full function. You're a happy, healthy person. And again, you really can't know, you can't be happy without knowing who you are. And a lot of people are stuck in these vain, lustful desires because they don't know who they are. And they're trying to get attention here, get attention there, so that they can distract themselves from the reality of who they are, or from other people. Like, you'll see men and women just talking to other men and women just because, just to try to get their mind off of somebody else that they actually really want. Or like, sometimes women will try to make you jealous intentionally, and they'll try to like talk to guys in front of you and see if they can just get a reaction out of you. And it's just, you don't need that kind of stuff. You don't even want to be around that when you're in this mode of being. You're just like, I'm on another level. I've got better things to do than to play cat and mouse with a demon. Like, I've got better things to do. And that's really how you're going to be able to break generational curses as well, is by recognizing that sometimes this kind of stuff is generational. It's not always because of you. And so it takes a lot of genuine curiosity about your family tree and where you've come from to get an inkling on where you're heading and where you've been based off of your ancestral line. Because if you can understand where you've been on your ancestral line, you'll know what you're dealing with. And fortunately, for myself, I had the opportunity to learn more about my genealogy before I had to cut contact with certain family members and etc., because it was something that was actually highly valued in my family at the time. Even though people didn't really understand the significance of it, it was still like highly valued. And I thank God for that, at least. So all of this is to say that semen retention can impact your epigenetics, and it can resolve you of generational curses. And with that being said, I hope this message was useful and insightful. And until next time, peace be with you.